I never expected to live to witness the day when a woman was bound to a post. Her back opened up with a whip and the mayor smiling, and the sheriff watching, picking his teeth like it was just another morning. But that is just what occurred in Tombstone, Arizona, summer of '83. The sun had already reached the point of being oppressive by 9 a.m., the kind that would cook an egg on the pavement. But nobody convened on the street due to the weather. They came to see the show. They came to see blood splat the ground. Her name was Eleanor Grace. Age 22, intelligent, obstinate, courageous to the point of foolishness. She rejected 3 marriage proposals. And not just any man, but Clayton Mercer, 50 years old, stinking rich, as cold as a snake, and with more cattle than the state of Nevada. The type of man who considered women possessions no better than a branded cow. When he couldn't purchase her affection, he purchased her punishment, paid off the mayor, pressured the law, and made the entire town witness. They pulled her to the center of the square, bound her to a post, and ripped the back of her dress open. When that first lash fell, cutting flesh, she didn't scream. She didn't even blink. That silence, it was worse than any scream. Following the second strike, the deputy's hand faltered. Old Miss Connors put her hand over her mouth. Little Billy Hatcher ran and hid behind the trough. But nobody came forward. Not one person. And that was worse than the whip. Worse than the blood. It was the silence of a town that had turned a blind eye, all because one young woman had had the temerity to say no. Then, just when everyone believed she was going to collapse, and with the third lash still suspended in midair like the tail of a rattlesnake poised to strike, they heard it. Clip-clop, clip-clop, slow, methodical, a sound that cut through the heat like a knife. Hats turned. Riding down Main Street was a stranger. Tall in the saddle, loose coat, pulled down hat. Dust streamed off his boots as if he'd ridden days. Face half obscured in darkness, but the manner in which he walked, you caught on quick. This man didn't flinch easy. He reined his horse to a sudden halt in the middle of the square. The crowd froze, the type of freeze that precedes a shootout. Mayor Boone took a deep breath, puffed out his chest. "Sir, this is official town business," he snarled as if he was still in charge. But the rider did not glance at him. His gaze was fixed on Eleanor, battered, panting, but upright. And then he spoke. "Cut her down. Low, flat. No room for debate." The deputy hung motionless, whip half raised. The mayor attempted to repeat himself. "Now see here, Mr. This woman spurned a lawful offer. Mr. Mercer's offer was—" The rider interrupted him. "You selling women now?" For words. That was all it took. Gasps washed through the crowd. The words themselves seemed to bite. Clayton Mercer pushed forward, arms folded, voice gravelly. "I paid off her father's debts. She's mine by contract." But Eleanor, swaying only on her feet, managed to speak. "My father never owed you a penny," she spat. "You're lying." Mercer simply smiled, slow and greasy, like a rattlesnake ready to strike. That's when the rider left his horse. Boots struck dirt with a resounding thud that rang down the street. He came to her as serene as Sunday morning. "What's your name?" "Eleanor Grace." "Did your father owe that man?" "No, sir. He went clean. Never owed a penny." The rider nodded once, then turned, loud and clear for everybody to hear. "I said, cut her down."
Mayor Bonpald.
His hand jerked, as if reaching for authority he no longer possessed. The rider's hand fell to his side. He didn't draw, didn't need to. One jerk, that was all it took. And every man in that square knew again what terror was. They dispersed. The mayor, the deputy, Mercer. All of them rode hard out of Tombstone as if the devil himself was pursuing them. No trial, no justice, no looking back, just dust, and the sound of hooves pounding like war drums. Eleanor spoke little. She rested against the stranger, almost unconscious, her back torn and bleeding. He rode with his arm around her, the other close to his colt. They rode until the sun dissolved behind the horizon. At last, they reached shelter, a weathered old trading post along the Apache Trail. The sign creaked in the wind, reading Miller's Outpost, but it could have very well read Last Chance. Old Man Miller stumbled out of the trading post as they came in, thin, weathered, and smelling of a combination of tobacco and desperation. He had stew, a backroom cot, and some fresh bandages to offer. Jackson was suspicious. Years of riding the trail had schooled him in the importance of trusting his instincts. But Eleanor had to sleep, and the old man looked harmless enough. There was silence for a while. Too much silence. And then Jackson noticed a heap of ashes in the fire pit warm. But no fire had been burned that night. He went out and noticed something else. A thin, climbing plume of smoke twisting into the air, straight and tidy, like a signal. Too neat, too deliberate. He kicked the door wide open. "Where's the telegraph?" he demanded. Miller blinked. "What telegraph?" Jackson clamped his fist in his collar, voice low and hard. "The one you used to send Mercer where we are." Eleanor struggled weakly from the cot, attempting to rise, perceiving the treachery. The old man's face wrinkled like parched vellum. "I didn't want no trouble," he grunted. "He promised gold. Said he just wanted the girl. Said you'd survive if I cooperated. That's the thing about cowards, they never know that they are one." Jackson knocked him unconscious, hoisted Eleanor into the saddle, and rode hard into the night. And just as expected, not an hour later, torches lit up behind them. Mercer's men. Close. And they weren't coming for a conversation. Some stories give you a moment to breathe. This isn't one of them. If you followed this far, maybe you're like Jackson, the kind who doesn't run from the truth, but rides straight into it. So if tales like this are still important to you, you know what to do. Stay around. Subscribe. We're not finished. Not even close. They arrived at Rancho del Sol at the break of dawn. Jackson was white, a graze on his shoulder still oozing blood. Eleanor, back raw and ripped, could hardly sit upright, but she clung on. Rancho wasn't much. A scatter of clay huts nestled in the rocks, but it was safe. For now, the Apache folk there didn't ask questions. They offered water, shade, quiet nods that seemed to say, "We've seen worse." From the shadows stepped Joseph Crow, Jackson's old brother-in-arms from the war. "You causing trouble again?" he said bluntly. Jackson nodded. "Ain't the first time." They kept under cover. Hours ticked by. Eleanor's injuries were tended. Jackson slept. For an instant, just an instant, there was peace. Then came the thunder. Not from the heavens, but from hooves. Mercer and his crew. 15 of them. Armed. Furious. They didn't knock. They surrounded Rancho like wolves bayed on injured game. Jackson groaned to his feet. Joseph handed him a rifle without uttering a word. Then he turned to Eleanor. "You ever shoot one of these?" She stared at the gun like it was something holy. Or bad.
No.
"You will." And that was all. She didn't pick it up with terror. She picked it up with intent. When the first shot resounded, it wasn't Jackson who did the firing. It was Eleanor. Shot a man clean off his horse. They didn't anticipate that. Didn't anticipate her. What ensued was pandemonium. Gunfire. Shrieks. Dust suspended in the air. Jackson manned the front. Eleanor took cover behind a barrel, reloading with trembling hands and fury in her eyes. When the dust had settled, 3 men lay dead. 2 injured. The others? They fled vanquished, tails between their legs. Eleanor didn't weep, didn't shake. She merely looked at the vacant horizon, heaving chest. For the first time, she wasn't running. No one pursued them after that day. Mercer licked his wounds in silence. Sheriff Boone disappeared behind closed doors. And Jackson? He returned Eleanor to that quiet little ranch nestled among the trees, where the air was fresh, and no one inquired as to who owned whom. The scars on her back never healed. Neither did the memories. But life moved on. They rebuilt the house, fixed the fence, raised chickens. Maybe a few kids someday, nobody knows for certain. But people say if you're ever passing by that canyon, and the wind picks up just right, you can hear her laugh light and true, the kind that only happens from somebody who worked for it the hard way. See, pain doesn't always break you. Sometimes it molds you, tells you who you are and who's worth fighting for. Eleanor did not want to be a fighter, but when the world attempted to shatter her, she stood. And perhaps that's the lesson. You don't have to be brave. You just have to be so tired of losing. And if you ever catch someone who rides with you, even when it's pure hell on the outside, hold them close. Because that ain't just survival. That's freedom. Now, if this story touched something in you, even just a spark, hit that like button. Maybe even subscribe. We've got more stories like this. Stories that count. Stories that remind us who we are after the dust settles. But before you leave, let me ask you this. If you were in that crowd back in Tombstone, would you have looked away, or would you have acted? Because sometimes, the only thing evil needs to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So ask yourself, what kind of man are you?